This is another one of those kind of foundational things that you have to know about. This is on page 108 and 109 of the opinion. Again, very critical. Our analysis of the general scientific reliability of the alcohol test is grounded in part on our expectation that there will be proof that a particular device has generated an alcohol influence report being offered into evidence was in good working order, that the operator of the device was appropriately qualified to administer the test. This requirement that the test results be supported by foundational proofs for admissibility has been part of our jurisprudence since we decided Romano. There, we demanded that as a precondition for admissibility of the results of the breathalyzer, the state was required to establish 1, the device is in good working order and has been inspected according to procedure. 2, the operator was certified. And 3, the test was administered according to official procedure. Circle that, number 3, okay? Very important. And then circle this next sentence. In matters related to the alcohol test, the same general considerations that give rise to these requirements must, of course, apply. Everybody got that? So the court is continuing on the tradition of admissibility that they set forth in Romano. The next part we're going to be discussing is number 3, that the test was administered according to official procedure, because this is going to be the first big battleground as the law develops over the way to utilize and implement the alcohol test in prosecutions. Okay, but everybody got this? These are all pieces of the puzzle you got to kind of string together. Okay, let's talk about proper administration of the test. This is the first thing the court talks about. Let's see. This is 1950s technology we're using up here in honor of the breathalyzer. All right. All right, remember, Justice Howens, it was not a state trooper, okay? She didn't wake up one day and automatically know how to operate an alcohol test. They're getting all this from Judge King's report, all right? These are Judge King's findings that the court is adopting. This is how the machine operates. Operators must wait 20 minutes before collecting a sample to avoid overestimating readings due to residual effects of mouth alcohol. The software is programmed to prohibit the operation of the device before the passage of 20 minutes from the time entered as the time of arrest. Moreover, the operator must observe the test subject for the required 20-minute period of time to ensure that no alcohol has entered the person's mouth while he or she is awaiting the start of the testing sequence. In addition, if the arrestee swallows anything or regurgitates, or if the operator notices chewing gum or tobacco in the person's mouth, this is a party, the operator is required to begin counting the 20-minute period anew. Dr. Menzel, could you talk about this a little bit? What's this all about?
This is the first time that something has been expressed an opinion that we all knew about. You have to, the officer has to watch the subject for 20 minutes. But this opinion is important because it clarifies who has to do the watching. It's the operator. You can't have the situation where an arresting officer brings in the subject, hands him off to the breathalyzer operator, and then they somehow are able to dovetail those 2 observation periods into a single observation period. And that makes sense because the arresting officer from the scene is doing a number of things, not the least of which is driving. You cannot look at a subject and drive a vehicle at the same time. At least you can't do it safely. So this becomes a litigatable, whatever.
How about litigious?
You can try it any time you have a case where you have to defend.
Can anybody else fill in for him today, please?
Because looking at the arrest time on the alcohol influence report and comparing it to the test time is not enough. The facts you need to uncover really can only be uncovered at trial.
In a certain sense, the arrest time is not really relevant.
It's really not, because for one thing, you might try to match it up with CAD records and other reports, but the bottom line is there's really very little synchronization in most departments between those times.
I disagree with some of that. The opinion mentions time of arrest as being the time of that the clock starts with the defendant. And if the arresting officer is the operator of the alcohol test, then that entire time can be used from the time of arrest to the time of stop, so long as there is no interruption in the arresting officer observing the defendant. In other words, in my estimation, reading this opinion, if the arresting officer puts the defendant under arrest and then goes and does an inventory check on the defendant's car at the scene of the arrest, then later comes back into the car, the time of arrest then becomes irrelevant for the 20 minutes because the defendant has been left alone for some period of time during the time when the officer is processing the defendant at the scene. However, if the arresting officer is with the defendant for 20 minutes from the time of arrest to the time of the first test, and the arresting officer is doing the test, then I feel that that time is sufficient to show the 20-minute observation period, deprivation period that the case calls for. Now, what the change is this, and what John was talking about earlier, and I agree with this, is that the state can no longer bracket that time with the arresting officer and the operator if the operator is a different person. Remember that since the alco test was initiated, there has been no initial training on the alco test. Everybody who was a certified breathalyzer operator before and was certified at the time could take the one-day course and become recertified for the alco test. But no new officers have been trained since State versus Chun to be on the alco test, to use the alco test. There's a lot of new officers on the road who have no training. And at night, troopers operate tandem. So you're going to have a lot of situations where you have a different arresting officer from a different operator, and the state clearly, under this opinion, my estimation, has to show 20 minutes with the operator, continuous observation, before the test can be admissible.
I'm trying to figure out where we disagree.
Well,
you're right, but
even if you
have the arresting officer being the operator.
You said that the time in the back of the car is not sufficient. I think that is sufficient.
Well, Judge, I don't know too many officers that have eyes behind their heads.
Okay, that's a
you see what I'm saying? This is a battleground area.
That's a difference, and I think that though, if you're looking for like regurgitation or belching, that the officer can be in a position to hear that, if not see it. Question.
Judge, I've been told by 3 judges in Camden County that this issue cannot be raised on existing Chun cases.
Absolutely, it can.
Okay.
Why not?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk around the state about there being some kind of retroactivity analysis. It just doesn't apply in Chun. You look at a case like State versus Cummings, where they go into great detail about how retroactivity applies. Well, number one, are your Chun pleas final convictions? The answer is no. So that's one strike under the reasoning in Cummings and State versus Knight that says retroactivity analysis doesn't apply. And does this mark a major change between past police practice? Well, the fact of the matter is, before Chun, with the alco test, there was no strict police, previous state police practice. So retroactivity analysis, if anybody raises it, it's just an exercise in bovine scatology, because the bottom line is it just doesn't apply. It doesn't match.
We're talking about police procedure here and the way the court wants police procedure to be governed in these cases. And I think that does have some retroactive application. There are other issues in the case which will not have retroactive application, and we'll discuss that this morning.
All right, operation then. Device starts, it automatically samples the room air to determine there are no chemical interference in the room. By the way, I mentioned to you, I've seen cases where you have these little rooms that have very poor circulation, like in here, and the molecules of alcohol actually coming out of the defendant's mouth while he's just kind of standing there waiting to be tested. The instrument will actually pick that up, and you won't get a clean sample out of the room air. This is known as a blank air test. Assuming that there are none, the machine then uses its attached wet bath simulator to heat a solution to produce a vapor from a control test solution known as of a known concentration of 0.10, which is then measured using infrared and EC technology. Now, 2 things. Let's start getting into the jargon that the cops use, just like on TV, okay? This simulator is referred to as a CU-34. So everybody write that down and start referring to it as a CU-34.
Calibrating unit 34 degrees.